engineers hire today's speaker to help them win more work. He is a consultant, speaker, and author of ACEC's 2014 book, Win More Work: How to Write Winning AEC Proposals. As an account executive with a global consulting firm, he learned to write proposals that outpaced competitors such as IBM and Xerox. As a software entrepreneur, he learned how to sell his ideas in 60 seconds. Most recently, he has helped engineers triple their win ratios while spending less money and time on proposals. A resident of Lexington, Kentucky, he is founder of Unbridled Revenue, Inc. The speaker for today's session, Win More Work: The Difference Makers of Winning Proposals, Jim Rogers.
Thank you, Ryan, and good afternoon. Let's start with a question. Are you better than average? Consider this question in terms of your professional career. Ask yourself, are you better than the average professional peer? Once you've had a chance to think about this, let's go a little bit deeper. Where do you rank? If you said you weren't better than average, maybe you're in the bottom half. If you are above average, maybe you're in the top 10%, top 25, maybe you're in the middle of the pack. Take a minute and think about that. I want you to hold on to your answer to that question because we're going to come back to it. You can think about that question, though, in terms of you, yourself, professionally. If you're in a group with some other folks, you might want to also consider how you would answer that question for your firm. Is your firm better than average? And if so, where do you rank? Well, either way, where do you rank? We're going to come back to it. Let's look at what some other folks have said when asked a similar question. When asked, university professors, when they were asked, do you do a better job than your colleagues, 94% said yes. U.S. drivers were surveyed and asked, are you better than the average driver? And 93% said yes. And 81% of Greek men think they're sexy. And for those Italian men who may be on the line, just so you know, you came in a very close second at 80%. So, okay, Jim, those are silly examples. Greek men, U.S. drivers, university professors. What does that have to do with me in business? Well, it may have a lot to do with it. Bain & Company, about 10 years ago, did a survey of over 1,000 companies. They asked CEOs and other senior executives to answer this question. Do you provide a superior value proposition than your competitors do? Do you provide a better value proposition than your competitors? 80% said yes, they do. They then went to those companies' customers and clients and asked them, do you agree with them? Do they provide a superior value proposition? 8% agreed. So the gap between 80 and 8, I'm not that good at math, but that, by my reckoning, comes up to be about 72% percentage points. That is a huge gap. How do we explain that? How would you account for it? I actually have coined a term that I think captures the spirit of this idea that we may be superior than our competitors or peers, other people in our cohort in some way. There are several terms for it, clinical terms. One is called illusory superiority. Another kind of easier to process term is the better than average effect. And for those of you who have listened, anybody that's listened to NPR in the last 30 years on a Saturday would be familiar with Garrison Keillor's Lake Wobegon, where The women are strong, the men are good looking, and all the children are above average. So it's also known as the Lake Wobegon effect. Well, I like the term betterness, and the betterness kind of captures what I would say is your belief or your assertion, even if you don't believe it fully. It's your belief or assertion that you're superior to your competitors. Now, I like the term betterness because, well, you know, I made it up, so it must be better than those other terms like Lake Wobegon effect and better than average. But there is something at its core here that is essential to being able to write winning proposals, to write better proposals, proposals that engage decision makers and help separate you from the competition in order to win more work. We're going to talk about the 8 tips, the kind of the 8 mechanical hard tips that you can start to employ in your proposals that are going to make these difference makers happen. You've got 2 bonus tips coming today, and one of them has to do with this idea of betterness and how letting go of that mindset that your betterness may matter or be visible to a decision maker. The tip is going to be let go of that mindset, and it's going to make a tremendous impact on not just your proposals, but it's going to make a big difference in your business development process as you're asking smart questions of the prospect, as you're testing your ideas about what they really want, as you seek to understand them and their, not just their stated needs for what they're looking for in a technical proposal, but their human needs. You know, the things that they may not even describe to you as values or decision criteria that they may have in selecting someone. So let me ask you this. Do you fit in on this graph? And if not, is there a chance that you're overestimating yourself? You know, do you know for sure? And I think, you know, we're being sponsored by Client Feedback Tool today, and I'm going to I want to give kudos to them for hosting these for their people that have become familiar with them over the years or work with them. But one of the things to find out would be, is this true or not? Am I suffering from betterness or the better than average effect? And a way to find this out is to ask them yourselves. You're going to want to do that before your competitors do, because you're going to have a leg up if you really honestly step back and face the truth about this question and dig a little bit deeper and see if you can uncover why. So if it's possible that this shows up in your business in some way, that you assert your betterness, whether you believe it or not, and the reason I say it may be your assertion is maybe you think there are lots of good alternatives. You're one of them. You're not necessarily better all the time. You're better perhaps for some projects than others, but they may have choices between good alternatives and others. Maybe you don't really believe that you're superior for a particular project, but I bet you've asserted it in a proposal somewhere. So it kind of doesn't really matter whether you believe it or not for those of you who may have been honest and fair with yourselves about where you fit in. But it shows up in your proposals because you think that you have to assert it in order for a judge to be able to see it. There's a problem with that. Is one of the things that it'll lead to is what I call the might as well syndrome. The might as well syndrome is like rolling the dice on a proposal, because, you know, we're qualified, they know us or we know them. We didn't do all the legwork we should have done on this project. We haven't done all the pre-proposal work that we should have done on this project, but we're qualified and they know us. We've worked with them before, they're familiar with us. We might as well, because what's it going to hurt to roll the dice a little bit? It also shows up in puffery or bloat, chest thumping in the proposal. We're the best, we hire the best and the brightest. We're the leader in our industry. We're going to talk some more about those kinds of phrases a little bit later. I'm going to give you some tips on how to eradicate those from your vocabulary and proposals. Here's an example, and I scraped this from a website and I adapted it a little bit to protect the innocent or guilty, however you want to think about it. You probably have something like this in either your marketing collateral or on a website somewhere, and if it's on a website, I can guarantee it's in a proposal somewhere. We're your one source for expert consulting services, exceptional planning services, superior project management, and unmatched construction supervision. Well, this is the kind of chest thumping that I'm talking about, the bloat, the puffery that shows up in a proposal. What are you really trying to get across? These keywords or co-words like unmatched, expert, exceptional, superior, and you believe that by asserting those words, by using in their proposal to refer to you, that a decision maker is going to be able to see it. And when they don't, and you get that phone call from the client that said, you know, it was a really tough decision, but for this project, we really think someone else was a better fit. We look forward to working with you in the future. Click. And you sit there after that call and you go, them, they picked those guys? I can't believe they picked those guys. Couldn't they see we were the best firm for this project? We were the best fit. Couldn't they see that? Well, no, they couldn't. So what does this ultimately do? It ends up leading to dull and boring proposals. I'm not sure exactly why we would want a prospective client, decision maker, to read a dull and boring proposal, but unintentionally that's what you've created if you have any of that puffery in the proposal instead of giving them content that matters to them. There's a trap in this notion of betterness that I've alluded to a couple of times, and I call it the betterness trap. Yeah, and that's me again, coining new terms. But here's the trap. The trap is that in your belief that decision makers will be able to recognize your betterness or be able to pick you out of a crowd even if you're just asserting your betterness in some way, that they will believe you. So it's a trap whether or not you believe in your betterness, assert your betterness. If you're doing either one of those two things, the misconception or the failure in your thinking is that decision makers can tell the difference. And there are a lot of reasons for that, but it all boils down to one, which is judges can't judge. You don't have people say, oh, come on, Jim, that's not fair. These are hardworking people. They're dedicated, sometimes public servants or it's a commercial, industrial client. You know, these people take it seriously, and they're working hard, and they're doing the best they can. What do you mean they can't judge? Well, I'm going to make it even worse right now. They're lazy. Judges are lazy. And now you go, oh, wait a minute. Now you've gone too far, Jim. You've stepped over the line. Well, people aren't intentionally lazy. And by that, what I mean is that when judges can't judge, when a decision is complex, when they're faced with good choices, they end up having to choose based on gut feel instead of methodically, systematically going through the information and making a completely rational decision. And I know this to be true because I talk to people that make these decisions, and when I ask them how they make the decisions and what happens when things are really close, they have their scorecard with their selection criteria on it, their scoring criteria for proposal, and they'll say, Jim, you got it right. So here's what I'll say. I'll say, have you ever filled out your scoring and you get down to the bottom or over to the right and you see that the scores don't add up to your gut feel? Have you ever gotten out an eraser and erased your math and made the math fit to your gut feel? And I've never had anyone say no. And it's a very honest thing for people to admit. I actually had one client who was very methodical. He actually created a spreadsheet with all the criteria for all the proposals he would judge over time. If he had 15 proposals, he had 15 columns and scored them. But he had a final row or final column on his spreadsheet that he called the override column. And it's where he could apply extra points, and they didn't have to share the system or the scoring with anybody. It was his own personal decision for voting, how he would arrive at it. But if it didn't feel right, he had an override, and that override is his instinct. So why is it that judges can't judge? Well, there are a lot. Information overload. We want to find a simple route when things are complex. Think about buying a home. Think about helping your kid pick a college, or you're having picked a college yourself. How about buying an engagement ring? These are complex decisions that maybe should be simple, but we end up either having to result to a default by latching on some information that was easier for us to process, or trusting someone based on gut feel whether or not they're steering you in the right direction. So when there's information overload, we try to simplify things. There's a default reaction we have, which means we tend to recall information that's either first in, and that's called primacy effect, or last in, which is called recency. If you're familiar with the accounting term LIFO, it means last in, first out. Well, our brains very often work that way. And for those of you who worry that maybe in an interview presentation you don't get to go last, maybe you're second out of 3 and you worry about that, there is a little bit of worry, but only if you let it make a difference. It just means that you might have to work a little bit harder to stand out and be memorable. Reputation bias. I mean, somebody's familiar with one firm and not as much another. And I used to work for a firm called Accenture. We competed with IBM. We were one of the largest global consulting firms in the world. Nobody ever got fired for hiring us or hiring IBM if there was a problem down the road, because you picked somebody that was supremely qualified, and you probably picked them over somebody that you may not have known as well. So there is a risk mitigation factor in selecting somebody with reputation. But here's a fascinating one. Fatigue and hunger can play a big part of this. And you think, okay, all right, tell me, Jim, what fatigue and hunger, how could that come into play? Well, if you were to go, there's a fascinating, fantastic book. You can buy it if you're interested in the psychology of decision-making. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, which is where I'm adapting some of this material from. It goes really deep. A lot of it has to do with how people on Wall Street make decisions and how they try to outgame each other and think that they're superior, and so they can win. So it may not be for you if you're not interested in all the details, but if you like it, you'll love it. This is a great book. And he cites some research that they did with parole judges in Israel. They watched, studied 8 parole judges in Israel. And these folks would spend entire days reviewing applications for parole. The cases are presented in random order. The judges spend really very little time on each one, about an average of 6 minutes. Can you imagine being in prison and a judge spending 6 minutes deciding whether or not you were going to be released or not? So the default decision in parole, as you can imagine, would be denial of parole. So only about 1/3 of requests are approved. So what the researchers studied was, as each decision was made, how long did they take, what time was it recorded, and then, when did the judges take rest breaks, which usually meant having some food. And so they had a morning break for snack, lunch, and they had an afternoon snack. So they went back and they plotted the proportion of approved requests against the time since the last food break, and what they found out was the proportion spikes after each meal, where about 2/3 of the parole requests that were granted were decided to grant parole, where it was right after a lunch break. And they saw within the hour or 2 before that lunch break or meal that it would drop down to almost nothing if somebody was tired and hungry. So how might this matter for you and your business? Well, a lot of times decisions are being made in the evenings when people are on their own time, maybe having a glass of wine, watching television, and after a long day, and they have a stack of 5, 10, 15 proposals, and they have to make decisions, and they're tired and hungry. So it could actually end up influencing whether or not you get selected. So that's just one example. It's a little bit of an outlier, but it's part of the reason I bring it up is there are lots of reasons why decisions get made and how people try to simplify those decisions. So what happens, and people, everywhere I go, everywhere I speak, any webinar that I present, I have people tell me that this is absolutely true. In the past, judges might have had a decision like this. There might have been 2 really good choices. Maybe there were half a dozen proposals submitted, maybe 6 to 8. Nowadays, there could be 3 choices that look pretty good, and there might be a dozen presented. But very often, people will say, it's more complex than that, and boy, I think that we could be the one, but we know that there are 3 other very qualified firms, and it could be an identical, not just an identical twins problem for us and for the decision makers, it could be an identical quadruplets problem. So here's difference maker 1. Difference maker 1 is let go of this notion of betterness, because judges can't see it, and that's the trap. If you have a betterness mindset, then it's going to show up in your proposals as might as well gambles, dull and boring proposals, and bloat, puffery, and several other things as well. So now we're going to talk about how you're going to overcome that technically. What are the decisions you can make? What are the tips that you can use to make those proposals memorable instead of just asserting your betterness? So these are going to be the 8. And I'm going to set this up and frame it a little bit so that you have 3 buckets where you can compartmentalize these concepts. It'll make it easier for you to recall them and apply them later. So the 3 elements of any proposal are substance, structure, and style. So if you address the difference makers in each one of these buckets, you're going to have a great opportunity to stand out against your competitors. Where those 3 circles intersect in this Venn diagram is where it becomes really apparent to the decision maker that they should hire you. Let's talk about substance first, because if you don't have substance, then style is like putting lipstick on a pig, and structure won't matter because people won't be able to follow your ideas. So the first thing you have to have is the right message and the right understanding of what the client's needs are. The way to have the best substance is to answer these 3 questions. We'll take them one at a time. The first is, why now? Second, what do they really want? And third, why you? So the why now question, this is your second tip, is the first and easiest one to apply, is answer the question why now in terms of outcomes. So why is the client doing this project now instead of another project? What made this a priority? What created urgency for this project? Or why is there value for your clients, customers, or the public, or their clients? You know, what is it going to do for the people that they want to serve with a particular project? It could be, these are usually big ideas, right? To protect the public, a lift test score, strengthen community. There are a whole lot of these, but there's a reason to do this, even if it's a real quick, early answer to this question. It starts to create a connection with the decision makers. One of the questions I get about answering this question first is this: Jim, do you know, I have technical reviewers of these proposals. These folks are engineers. They just want to cut to the chase. They want to get to the meat of the proposal, and they don't want a whole lot of setup around the why now, what is it we're really trying to achieve. And I understand that. I buy it. You have to know your audience. I still suggest in a cover letter that you quickly touch base on why it's important for that person or for the decision makers and the sponsors of the project and the end users of whatever it is that you're designing that will be built. And one of the reasons is it helps validate why the person does what they do. So very often people feel unappreciated, besieged, overwhelmed in their roles, and by making it and identifying that there's a larger reason for what it is they're doing, it helps validate them as a person and validate their importance. So answer that question first. It might just need to be 2 or 3 sentences. You don't need to write 3 paragraphs on why the project's important. If there was a bus crash on an interstate and people were killed and it became a public priority for the governor or a legislator, that's enough to say this is about protecting the public. Part of the reason to do that is it's important to show the client that you understand them and their needs before they're willing to listen to you at all. So question number 2 dovetails into that too, and this is Difference Maker 3, but it's question number 2 that you're going to answer, which is, what do they really want? And this is kind of a heavy question if you haven't spent enough time with a client, and this happens with folks who've worked with the same client for years, and I call those folks the usual suspects. So there may be 2 or 3 or 5 firms that work with this client over and over. You're a usual suspect. You get hired, but very often you may not know what that person's deepest buyer values are. You may not know what's important to them for this particular project. And if there are multiple decision makers, it even gets a little bit more difficult. So you can't always answer all these questions, the answer to this question in the written proposal itself, but you can answer it or try to understand it along the way in the pre-sales or pre-proposal stage in business development so that they know you get it, even if you can't write all of these answers out for each one of the decision makers. You can't write all those out succinctly in a proposal. But here are the kinds of things that people really buy. You know, people want praise, because who wouldn't want praise for having done a good job? People want to avoid criticism or avoid getting in trouble. And an example of that is, I have several transportation examples. I can provide others, but I dial in on these because they're very concrete for anyone. Is in my home state of Kentucky, the governor every year needs to stand up at the state address and say, we delivered $1 billion in highway construction lettings this year. Well, one of the biggest chunks of those dollars is highway repaving. So if highway repaving projects and widening projects aren't led to construction fast enough, which goes back to the engineers getting their work done to set that up, if they misschedule, then he doesn't get to say $1 billion. Somebody's in trouble for that. And that's not one of those attaboy, attagirl kinds of conversations that happens if you hit $1 billion. That's the minimum requirement. And you're in trouble if you don't. So it happens. One buyer value that's sometimes overlooked, and I bring this one up because it's a subtle one, and I want people to understand that it's not always those really big ones to get praise or get a promotion or avoid pain problem, is it could be something as simple as leaving a legacy. If you have somebody that's making a decision and it's late in their career, and it could be one of the capstones in their career, you want to speak to that in some way. Here's actually let me sorry for going back. Let me give an example of this because this is one that's hard for people to wrap their heads around. I had a client that was working on winning a piece of business that seemed small, but it was going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars for design engineering for a county. A county highway supervisor was about to retire, and one of the things that he wanted to do was replace all the remaining single-lane bridges in the county. And so in the cover letter, we just included a couple of sentences that basically, hark back to that as something that would be of value to the people who needed to get the work done, which was to say, people do a lot of really important things. Sometimes they're really big. They're really big projects, but sometimes part of what people will look back and be proud of are some small things that are put together, like replacing all the single-lane bridges in the county. So we were fairly discreet about how to do that, but without hitting somebody in the face with a wet mop. But we were able to touch the decision makers on a button that was important to them, which was legacy. So here's and this is the toughest concept that we'll tackle today. So I encourage people to get fingers on the keyboard to be able to ask some questions about this if you get stuck, or anything that came before it. I'll go back. But the third question to answer is why you? And the answer to why you has to be framed in terms of a benefit to the client. So here's some examples. One, we're local. Well, what does that mean? Well, you can just say that you're local. Okay, so what? Well, we can be on site quickly. Okay, so what? Well, that means we can meet on your schedule, not ours. If you have an existing relationship with a client, then they probably know about your responsiveness. This is a good time to reinforce that. Or even when you're asking for feedback on your performance, just say, what's one of the things you like working, well, what's one of the reasons you like working with us? And they may say, you're really responsive. When my schedule shifts and I have an opening, I find out the day before, and I know you're going to be able to be there. You don't have to get on an airplane to come meet with me the next day. So take each one of these strengths or advantages that you have, and if you can tie it back to to a reason that they're trying to make a decision, then that's going to resonate with them. So here's another one. We're small. Okay, so what? Well, you get the owners of the firm. Okay, well, so what? Well, our name's on the door, so our reputation's everything. We're not a large corporation. So you also get our most experienced designers. We're the ones doing the work because we're not a large firm, right? So some people could see that as reduced risk because they're getting the principals or owners of the firm. We're in-house. Well, this is one that I see that's selling a lot. And if you're not just in-house, don't worry. But one of the concepts that I'm seeing sell often is we're going to reduce the amount of effort or unnecessary effort or time for you to be able to complete this project. Well, if we handle all the services in-house, then they have a single point of contact, which means you spend less time coordinating. And I think people know that to be true, even though you may have one team with partners, subs involved in a project. People that have worked on projects like that may have experienced that takes a little bit more coordination on their part. So if they're buying reduced effort, and that happens very often, then there are several reasons. There are several other strengths or advantages that you could use to resonate with that particular buyer value. I hope that makes sense.
Hey, Jim, there's a question that's come in here. This is Ryan interrupting. One of the participants has asked, I see what you're talking about with the small firm piece, but how do we communicate confidence as a small business and compete for larger and more profitable projects?
That's a very good question, and I'm going to be able to demonstrate or talk about some techniques later that I think will kind of polish your professionalism and represent yourself well with confidence and go toe-to-toe with larger firms. But that's more mechanical. But I think first and foremost is to have confidence in what it is that you're selling. If you have confidence that your strengths will be advantages for your client because it connects with something that you know that they want, you have no reason to doubt. You have no reason to lay back and think that it's a might as well roll the dice kind of opportunity. If you have worked that relationship and worked hard to understand not just the technical need, but what the real buyer values are as part of relationship building in the course of business development, and you truly know that what you're selling is something that would be a benefit to them, and you test that idea with them by saying, look, we're small. Would that get in the way of you hiring us? Or you could just be more vague. What would get in the way of your hiring us? And if they say, well, we haven't usually used a firm of your size on a project like this before. Your next question might be, well, how would we overcome that? And overcome that might mean, well, how do we overcome the perception? But it also might be, you know, they may say, well, you need to team with somebody larger for this. And you've got an honest answer from them. You know where you stand. Now you take the doubt out, and you're not rolling the dice anymore. But it starts with confidence, and confidence in knowing what they need and what you have to offer. There's a client nearby who is has won a lot of work over the years as a disadvantaged business, and they're getting ready to lose they're getting ready to lose that advantage because they're up in the revenue range where they're not going to qualify anymore. They had to make a decision. Do we want to stay where we are, or do we want to grow and run with the big dogs? And they made the decision that they wanted to grow. And I'm proud of them for that. So how do you get the answers to those questions? And it should be an easy part, but sometimes it helps to have somebody guide you through this. And you heard me do it on the prior slide by saying, so what? So what? And if you keep asking that until you get back and you can't ask that question anymore because it becomes comical, then you know you have an answer, a real answer. So if you do this, you know, instead of so what, here's a nicer way to do it, is to finish this sentence. So we are small, so as a result, you will have the principals working on this job. They're doing the design work. And because of that, as a result, you'll reduce risk. Or it may save you money because we're able to do things in-house. Let's use that as an example. Maybe it saves schedule because we do it in-house. It's easier to walk down the hall and coordinate with somebody with their own firm than have to schedule an outside meeting that might take a couple of days. So another way to think about this, if you don't like as a result will, you can say so that. Just finish the sentence so that. So those are the three big, let me go back and recap real quickly before we move on, because we're moving into a different idea here. So first question you're going to answer is why now? You're going to answer that in terms of what are the overall benefits that the client's going to, or outcomes they're going to achieve. Second is what do they really want, which means that you understand what they are most worried about or interested in. One quick example about that. We knew we had a swing boat. It was the project manager, but there were 5 decision makers. The project manager was probably going to be the swing boat. Okay, he had to own the project. Well, he had a newborn baby at home. So we had 2 more projects on the plan coming down the pike, and so we knew that that person was going to feel overwhelmed. Is this going to be one of those projects that's going to take unnecessary effort for me or worry? I want to be able to get some sleep at night. I'm not going to get very much. So we geared everything that we were doing toward how we were going to eliminate effort for him. And part of it was in dealing with environmental issues, which can often derail projects. So we made sure that we were going to eliminate any environmental issues that would get in the way. So that's how we answered the question, what do they really want? And we connected a strength, which was our strength in environmental engineering, to the problem that they had, what they were really buying. So I hope that makes sense. But the next tip I'm going to set up by asking you a question. If you have pencil and paper, do this. I want you to do this exercise for me. Pull out a piece of paper and do this individually. Don't collaborate with other people in the room if you have some other folks in the room with you. Write down the names of the 7 dwarfs, as in Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs fame. List the names of the 7 dwarfs. I'm going to give you about 20 seconds to give that your best shot. So if you haven't gotten all 7, compare, and no, Snow White doesn't count, so you can't get to 7 with her. You compare notes with somebody next to you in the room. If you put the whole list, put the 2 lists together, do you have 7? And here's, I'm going to see if this will help you. Sometimes this doesn't get everybody all 7. You know, I have twin 9-year-old girls and a boy that turned 8 2 weeks ago. I've seen this movie a lot in the last 10 years, and if you were to, and I've done this exercise with people all over the United States, and if you were to ask me to do this, you caught me off guard, getting out of my car, I probably couldn't do it. So how many of you got the 1/3 from the left? And if you did, and I'll remind you who it is in a second, if you did get it, how far down on the list was it? So you have on the left to right, I'm going to skip the 3rd one, you have dopey, sneezy, doc, happy, grumpy, sleepy, and the one that people tend to miss is bashful, the 3rd from the left. And part of the reason for that might be it's just a passive characteristic. He's kind of forgettable. He doesn't have the personality that the others have. So be interested to know how you folks ended up with that list. But I do not get very many people that get all 7. Why do I bring this up? 5th difference maker. Find one win theme. Find one win theme. And I'll give you a tip for how to do this. Take a business card and turn it over if you have blanks out of a business card, which your marketing folks probably tell you don't have a blank side of a business card because it's wasted real estate. If you're going to print them, go ahead and have something on the back. But if you have a blank side of a business card, write down your one key idea that you would want decision makers to remember when they finish reading your proposal, or if you sat down after the interview or walked out of the room after the interview. What's the one thing that you would want them to remember? If you say it can't be done, I have 4 basically big ideas from 4 different presidential campaigns in the last 25 years that can be put on the back of a card. Is the economy stupid is the one everybody hears over and over, but Reagan's second campaign was It's Morning in America, which may have also been a slogan, but it meant that America was coming back, continued to come back. Yes, we can. Everybody knows that one. Don't change horses in midstream. Not sure anybody ever said that, but George W. Bush in second re-election would have argued we're on a war footing. Why would you change presidents when we're at war? So I believe that you could be able to get down to the one idea.
Hey, Jim, there's another question coming in here. 2 parts. How do you pick which one is the most important, and do we really have to pick just one?
Yeah, great question. So, and I get this question a lot. I'll give you an example of the thing that has been working extremely well for me and my clients. It's almost fail-proof, and it usually lines up around one big idea, but you can sometimes have a second one. Maybe the second one is you have a very good technical solution or idea that you think nobody else would come up with because it's something that's unique to you. Now, I'm sure you've all done open records requests on a losing proposal and gotten a winning proposal, and you find out that your idea that you thought was so great and unique wasn't unique. So you can't always trust that a technical solution or idea that you have may be unique. But the one that needs to be in there is something that's going to connect with, again, the buyer value, and to me, the 2 big ideas that are showing up over and over and over. I've already explained one, which is reduce the amount of effort, unnecessary effort on the part of the client. The second one, and this is really important in the commercial space, probably more than the first idea, is schedule. Schedule, 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 schedule. So if you're, so if between budget, schedule, and quality, If they're all important, then nothing's important. There's usually one of those that takes primacy over all other things that are important for the client. You know, maybe it is budget, and then it's hard to compete on price. You'd have to be looking for ways to save them, other ways to save them money. So if you were to line up your strengths around that one idea, the thing you would want them to remember is we're the one team that can meet schedule. Or we're the team that gives you the best chance of meeting schedule, because maybe there are several teams that could, but you want to remove some risk on their part. And some of that may be we're local, we have the capacity, we are large, so that if we don't have the capacity, we'll go get it, we'll import it from somewhere else to be able to stay on schedule. Or we'll buy more equipment in order to stay on schedule. So whatever some of your strengths or advantages are, if you can line those up and make that evidence that you can meet schedule in a way that other firms may not be able to, by putting that whole story together, that's your win-win team. It's not all the strengths and hot buttons and advantages that roll up into that one idea. It's the one idea. We're the team that will meet schedule or give you the best chance. So that's how you find the one, and then again, sometimes you do have a sub-theme that you just can't avoid. Maybe it is, we're going to meet schedule, and we're going to prevent unnecessary effort. And those are the two winners over and over. Thank you, Ryan. So we talked about substance again, three questions. Why now? What do they really want? And why me or why us? And we talked about getting it down to one. Once you figured out what the benefits are, try to tie back to one main idea. I'm going to move to structure, and boy, this is going to be easy, because structure follows the three questions that I just laid out. The way you want to structure the proposal is why now, what do they really want, and why you. Answer those three questions in that order. So I'm not going to talk about that again. I'm going to move on to two other things that are really going to help a lot. One is start with them. And by answering the questions in the order I gave you, that will help you do that. But here's a technique to make sure that you're doing it. Here's how you self-police, is to go back and look for your you to me ratio. You want to have a high you to me ratio. So by that I mean you meaning your client, your buyer, your decision maker. Me being I'm the person trying to win the piece of work. So how do you do this? How do you measure the ratio? Take out a cover letter, take a technical approach. I would just look at maybe the first 3 or 4 paragraphs and the closing 3 or 4 paragraphs or 2 paragraphs of a technical approach section, and look for the words you, which might mean, you know, client name, client role, client by name, you, any of those things that would describe them. And then me, look for things like us, we, our firm name, us, any of those words that refer to me. Look for those words, take a yellow highlighter and highlight the yous, take another color highlighter, pink, blue, whatever, highlight the me's, and then go total up your ratio. Now, if you're looking at a cover letter or executive summary, read the whole document, or at least everything except maybe the middle couple of paragraphs, and see what your ratio is. You're going to want to shoot for 5 to 1. You're not going to get there probably. If you're going to find out that you're 1 to 3 or 1 to 2 right now. If you can flip that and get to 2 to 1 or 3 to 1, you're going to be 3 times better than your competitors. I almost guarantee it, because they're just not thinking about this. They're going to start off with, you know, we're pleased to submit this proposal. We've been in business for X number of years. We have offices here, here, and here. We have over 1,000 years collective experience. It's going to be me, 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 hire me, which is just a bunch of yada, yada, yada to them. Think about trying to get to the me. That is not me for them. You want to connect with them. So start with them. That influences your structure, and the way to test it is to go back with those highlighters and do the ratio. Second thing to do is don't bury the lead. And earlier I talked about LIFO, or the recency effect, which is last in, first out, people to be able to remember what they've read. That doesn't really apply to the written proposal. You need to put your best argument first, not save it for last, because you can't be sure that they'll keep reading and finish all the ideas. So you have to put your most compelling one first. Now, somebody might be thinking, hey, Jim, that's not how you spell lead. Well, in journalism and publishing, they actually do use the word lead, L-E-D-E, as much as anything to distinguish it from the word L-E-A-D, to communicate the lead idea, lead sentence that draws you in as a reader. It's probably going to be the most interesting idea and the thing that you're going to remember most from a written proposal. In an interview presentation and you're keeping your ideas tight, you might want your best idea to be last. You know it's going to be heard, people are in the room. Could be a little difference there. I hope that makes sense. And go ahead and ask your questions along the way. Don't worry about having to go back a couple. If you have other questions about prior material, don't feel like it has to be right here, right now. So that's difference maker number 7. So again, this intersection between the three spheres where the client says, I should hire you. The last element of this is style. And for me, style isn't always about aesthetics in terms of aesthetics for aesthetics' sake. I know architects very often have a higher standard here, held to a higher standard than engineers may be or construction firms may be, depending on the situation. So my architect friends will tell me, hey, Jim, we have to aesthetically make this beautiful. And I buy that, right? You have to know your clients. You have to know the business you're in. However, I think that the important thing to do is make sure that the aesthetics are not being done for aesthetic's sake, but they're being done in service of the message that you're trying to deliver to the client. Otherwise, it can become clutter. So I'm going to talk about ways to declutter your proposal, and to me, those are the two most, what you're about to hear, are the two most important elements of style. The first is, and this applies mostly to written proposals, is to avoid babble. Babble being baseless assertions and bankrupt blather. Baseless assertions meaning, my example from earlier, we're the best and brightest, we're the premier firm in our industry. That's a baseless assertion unless you can prove it. If you're AECOM, you can say we're the largest. You're still going to want to be able to tie that back to something that's important to them and not just assert that that's the best reason to buy you, but it could mean lower risk. You want to connect that idea back, AECOM, to something that they're really buying. So that would be a baseless assertion. Bankrupt blather are the kinds of words that we talked about earlier that were in the example I used: expert, exceptional, superior, unmatched. All of these kinds of words clutter your proposal so that your main ideas can't stand out. And this is fluff, marketing fluff, that people don't want to read, and you didn't want to write it. I know you didn't want to write it. People tell me all the time, I hate that. That's the marketing part, and I hate it. You know what? It's not. It may be marketing. It's not good marketing. And the reason you hate it is because it is puffery, and you don't believe it, and you know the client's not going to believe it. But you're making them read it. So everybody's uncomfortable with it. It's fairly easy to scrub these out. I have if you want to type in some examples of other words like this, but I have a list of about 40 that I have running. I'd love for people to send me examples, and I add them to the list. I could send you my list if you want. Actually, website, unbridledrevenue.com, I have a couple of posts that probably give about 20 of these. You can do a find and replace. Take an old proposal and look for some of these words, do a find, and see how many of these show up in your proposals. The one word
Jim,
that I
got a question here.
Yeah, go ahead. Thank you, Ryan.
How do you get buy-in from leadership to change the boilerplate material that has always been used?
Oh, in speaking at SNPS meetings, I've been getting that question a lot, and I think what people are saying is, you know, the technical experts are the people who have signing authority on the proposals. They're client-facing people, and I'm our marketing person who helps assemble and make sense out of this proposal, try to make it clear for the reader, or help support people in preparing for an interview. But people don't listen to me when I try to suggest new techniques and tips. They don't want to try it out. So I have a couple of ideas here. One is to kind of try to bring them along in the mental process to a place where they buy into the fact that something needs to change. If you want somebody to change their behavior, there are really only two elements barriers to getting people to change. The first is desire or motivation. The second one's ability. And 2/3 of the time I find in this industry, in the AEC space, that it's the latter. It's the 2/3 of people that are afraid or lack confidence in their ability to do something new, right? Or the default reaction is, I don't have time, right? So I may be able to learn the ability, but I just don't have, I don't have time. I don't have the capability within my work life, or I don't have the skills, right? You want me to write something different. I don't know how to scrub my vocabulary from this. I don't know how to tie this back to what somebody's really buying. So if you can, once you get there, if you can help people understand by, you know, maybe working with somebody from the outside, that they can get there. And you don't get there just working on one proposal, right? You get there a little bit at a time over a series of proposals over time, and it takes months to do this. There is a way. The first part of it, the first barrier, which happens about 1/3 of the time, is just the motivation. Why should we change? And one way to try to overcome that is to just ask the question, can we do better? What would it mean for the business if we could do better? Would it make a difference if we could do better? And if you get somebody to say, yeah, well, of course, we have headroom, we can do better. And they say, will it matter? Yeah, it might matter, one deal a year, a couple of deals a year. But yeah, it could matter. And then you can ask the question, how can I help you do that? If they don't have a good answer for that, you can say, well, are you open to new ideas? And who's going to say no to, are you open to new ideas? Because nobody's going to want to admit that they're not open to new ideas. And then when you introduce those, and they say, yeah, you introduce those new ideas later, and they argue with you, you could say, oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were open to new ideas. I know that sounds really cheeky, but it doesn't have to be. You just have to deliver it in a nice way. I'm sorry, these were some of the new ideas that I thought we would try out. Are there others you think we should try? So at some point, you have to kind of give them control of the conversation and help figure out and get them to declare what it is that they want or need or expect from you, and I think you'll move forward with them. There's another resource. I know back in at SNPS in January, Carolyn Ferguson, who I know works closely with Client Feedback Tool. She's in Dallas and former president of SNPS for you marketing folks who may already know her. She did a seminar or webinar in January on managing up, and this is addressed in much more detail there. So you know, I can only give you a 3-minute answer, but that would be a great resource for you. I know that webinar is available on the SNPS website. So if that didn't answer your question, type in, and I'll try to qualify that. But very good question. And I work with a lot of engineers say, Jim, I don't do interview presentations, but I can't not talk at least a little bit about interview presentations to connect with other people who do on call. So I don't want to neglect it, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. And here's the one tip or two tips that I think make the biggest difference in decluttering your presentation. And the first is a mindset shift, which is the mindset shift to you are the presentation, not your slides. And I work with people a lot that say, I get it, I know it, but you cannot pry the slides from their cold, dead hands. You just, as hard as you work at it and you get the acknowledgement, there's just this whether it's fear or fear of not being able to articulate their ideas, and so they want a teleprompter. I encourage people to go to Toastmasters or find some other, I prefer Toastmasters because you learn over weeks and months and years to become more comfortable as a speaker or polish your speaking skills. Is a great place to do that. And I know Ryan Saddam told me earlier today he's been a Toastmaster himself. I think that is more effective than having a training event that happens in a one-day workshop or two-day workshop. You can learn some skills there, but the half-life of those skills is very short. You have to really learn those over time. But as part of that process of learning and taking risks and trying, is if you'll step back and understand that you're the presentation, they came to hear you, you're part of the message, they want to hear your best ideas, and those ideas don't all have to be on a slide. So how do you declutter your slides? Here's some that you can get rid of. And many people know these, but they don't just visualize it. So here are a few. Use flip charts. I had a client that won an $80 million GEC, a general engineering contract, going in with no slides. We had a flip chart prepared that had one word written on it, which was schedule. You'll remember I said schedule cells. And the deadline for this project was 2021. So he went in, wrote 2021 under that word schedule, and he used the flip chart. He didn't write much else on it because he didn't have to. Well, how did that come about? Well, he had not done many interview presentations and was uncomfortable. He wasn't scared, but he was uncomfortable presenting, didn't know what to do with his hands, was worried about using notes. And finally I asked, well, how are they used to seeing you when they work with you? And somebody that was on the mock panel, selection committee panel, said, I've never seen you without a flip chart, without a marker and flip chart next to you. And that's where the idea came from. We were going in with no slides and it ended up being, let's use a flip chart. It also gives you a chance to actually get information from the people in the room and capture it on a flip chart for further discussion or show that you're listening. Having some sort of prop, story that I tell in some places I won't today, had to do with somebody went very unassuming with no slides going in and pulling out a fastener and describing how they helped design it, how they used it, and why that was going to prevent safety issues in a parking garage. Slides that you would need an eye chart to read, or read like an eye chart, you would need a telescope to read. Slides with question marks on them, you're getting ready to see one of those from me, but you don't need those, or one that says Q&A. You can just hit the B key when you're in PowerPoint mode. It blacks the slide out, and it brings everybody's attention back to you. Unfortunately, best practices for webinars are to have lots of slides because you can't see me. You need something to look at. Clip art. Boy, Bean people are still the poster child for clip art. And so if you're using anything that is not a real photography, and I suggest not using it, and I'll have people even go a little bit further and say, don't use stock photography. Well, I can't afford to send somebody out with a camera to take my pictures for me, so I use stock photography. But if they're images of projects that you've done or your people, make sure that they are photographs and avoid clip art. You can use smart art graphics and things like that, of course, within PowerPoint. Those are good tools. The obligatory partnering, handshake. So there are dozens of examples of those. There are many books. Presentations End by Gar Reynolds is my Bible for this. I keep it on my shelf. It's my one and only book around presentation design. I still aspire to that level. I'm not there yet, but continue to strive. Gar Reynolds, Presentations End. If you want to go to unbridledrevenue.com, there's a tab called Jim Recommends, and I'll have some of these books and other resources that are fun, entertaining, valuable, that will help you. But the big idea, Difference Maker 10, remember there were 2 that were mindset and 8 that were more technique, tactic, tips, is when in doubt, weed it out. So if you have an hour, or if you have a 30-minute presentation, 5 to 6 slides may do. I have an exercise that I do with clients. I have them lay out the presentation. They may have 40 slides. So you take your 10 best slides that represent your ideas. They'll find the 10. They try to negotiate. Can I have 12? No, you get 10. Then they get their 10. I said, pick the one that represents your main idea. They pick the one that represents the main idea, or create it if there's not one. We put the rest aside. I said, could you do the presentation from the one idea? Well, yeah. Why would you go in with one slide? And they're like, oh, okay, let's find another way to do it. Can we use a prop, flip chart, poster, storyboards, something else that grabs somebody's attention? I'm going to go back and recap some of the big ideas from today. I wouldn't expect you to get all 10 tips. We can send this out as a PDF for people to be able to refer back to, because they're not very text intensive. I find that they don't always stand alone very well. So I advise not printing it out. Just save the paper, but it's good to kind of keep it as a reminder. I have other tools that are better if you want to, and I'll give you a way to reach me later. But let me stop for questions now, and then I'm going to come back, do some housekeeping, tie a bow on it, and turn it back over to Ryan to wind us up today. We'll spend about 10 minutes. I have a good 10 minutes to answer questions.
Great. Hey, Jim, there was a question here. I think this goes back to your fifth difference maker of finding one theme. The question is, can you have a different most important thing for each client, and how would you find that out?
Again, good question. I don't know if you mean client decision maker, so if you have a panel or committee, the selection committee, if that's the question, then clearly it's, what have you done to understand those folks along the way? Now, if you don't always know who's going to be on the selection committee, and there are too many people that are potential candidates to help make the decision, there's some pre-work that needs to be done that's marketing that's maybe not even related to this pursuit, this opportunity, which is the kind of the get-to-know-you meetings that you might have, or even seeing somebody at a conference, making sure you get a chance to position yourself with them. But I think during the business development cycle, when there's a real opportunity, there's a real pursuit, a lot of it's about effective questioning. But, Ryan, I may want to ask you to talk about this, but part of it might be asking for feedback along, I've heard you tell stories about this, the feedback that you can ask for along the way at different stages of the process to make sure that you understand the client, what it is they're really looking for.
Yeah, I'll jump in. We've
cut you off guard.
No. There's a couple of things we've seen feedback do during the proposal phase or business development pre-proposal phase. One, you are able to ask questions, and you can't ask, am I going to win, or anything useless like that. But going back to your example of schedule being the most important thing in many cases, you can ask relevant questions like, how clearly have we communicated how we will manage the schedule? And you're really seeking to understand, are we giving you the information you need for what's most important? Based on their feedback, you can identify across the 5, 6, 7 different really important things, quality, schedule, budget, all the things you talk about, responsiveness, hopefulness. The clients can tell you what's the one thing that matters most to them, and you can then use that to refine your approach. There's a couple of neat things that happen when you do that. Not only are you getting the message, but there's some really interesting psychology, and I'm going to tell you something here. You can use this information for ill purpose, so please behave yourself. There's a great book by Robert Cialdini called Influence, and he talks about the 6 key ways to influence the thinking or the decisions that people make. When someone goes on record giving you positive feedback, they are now wired, they're predisposed to like you. because they've gone on record saying you did a good job. And for them to come back and say, no, I don't want to do business with you, would make them look inconsistent, and people don't like looking inconsistent. So it's fascinating how that can work. And additionally, you've now created a connection in their mind that they connect your business development process or your proposal with a positive outcome, so they talk about you to the others who are influencing or deciding in a positive way. And that social evidence raises the bar for all and makes it harder for them to say no. It's a really interesting technique, and I've had some firms try that and report back pretty substantial increases in selection rates, up to 50% in some cases. Of course, you always have the opportunity to find some challenging feedback, and I was working with a firm in the Midwest who experimented with this and got their first response from a 20-year client, and the scores were all just really challenging. Well, they had a new procurement person who had just taken a job at that client's organization, and she expected a 10 to 20 page RFP with all the boilerplate you said to cut out. And this firm was really savvy and had always just done a one-page proposal for this long-term client. So they were able to take the information, put together some of the boilerplate, send it over, and secure the job. So I'm a big advocate of feedback in general, but specifically in the business development and proposal phase. Those of you working in public sector, just be cautious, make sure you're not violating any rules, but don't assume there are rules when there aren't. All too often I've heard firms say, oh, they're public sector, they can't talk to us, but our research shows they actually are quite open and receptive to giving that feedback. So that's probably a longer answer than you intended for, but is that what you were after, Jim?
Yes, and I know that there are formal evaluation processes that people have. They tend to be done end of project. So, there are probably opportunities to use, client feedback tool or, to check in with people during the course of the project to say, how are we doing? What can we do to improve? So that you don't wait until the end to figure it that you're being scored a 89 instead of your normal 96, if it's on a 100-point scale. To not wait till the end. It's a little too late to use that information. But yes, the process of asking for feedback along the way, even quick check-in in meetings, say, how are we doing? What can we do better? But during the business development process, especially with existing business, is to ask them, what is it that you like working on? Well, why is it that you like working with us? Or what's the best thing about working with us? So if you do that after you've asked them for critical feedback, so how am I doing, then you're kind of punching out on some positive feedback from them, to your point, that they can't ignore later when they're trying to make a decision. They've made an emotional commitment to you. So, other questions?
Yeah, Jim, there's one here. You talk about using these tips to differentiate our firm. What would be one theme you feel we should incorporate into our proposals?
Well, I think, I hope this has popped out, but the two buyer values that I've seen, they're most consistent, and they're also ones that you would use if you're not exactly sure that it's something else. All right? If you're not sure, you're going to want to go with unnecessary effort. If it's a government client, that's going to be, number one. Number two is going to be schedule. But with a commercial client, it's probably going to flip it. Number two is going to be schedule because time is money. Sometimes people aren't worried about a little extra budget. They got to, if you have to go back and do rework or do something to make things happen faster, cost a little bit more money, they may not care because schedule reigns supreme with them. So
Jim, let me interrupt here. It looks like there is a follow-on to that question. I think they're putting you to the test, and maybe they're giving you permission for a little bit of a pitch of what Jim Rogers does. What is your major theme?
Oh, well, my major theme is win more work, right? Because who doesn't want that? Although I did tell somebody asked me at a cocktail party what I do, and I said I help architects, engineers win more work. And they said, win more work? Why would anybody want that? So, so that's the idea, is clearly to improve the top line. But then how do I do that? My business model is different from a lot of people that do presentation coaching or do proposal writing. I read all the other books about proposal writing, and usually the authors will say, well, I've written thousands of proposals in my career, or written or touched thousands of proposals. I don't want to touch 1,000 proposals. I'm probably between 100 and 200, and that's enough for me. And so, and then on the other end of it, there are people that are very good at getting people prepared in the late stages, getting ready for presentation. What my message is with clients is to institutionalize the change. So by working with me, I'm not a sniper. I don't just come in and work on one proposal, or that's not my goal with a client, or work on one interview presentation. Is to create sustainable cultural change, to get technical people to speak with marketing experts and the account-facing engineers, architects, or construction managers to be aligned, and that takes time. There's a change management process that you have to go through of people understanding what best practices are, and then overcoming the fear or doubt and uncertainty, FUD, some people call it fear, uncertainty, and doubt, but they're able to do it. So by working on a series of proposals over time, injecting some learning along the way, we enable an organization to create sustainable culture change where you're over and over and over winning more work. So win more work, the buyer
Great,
value.
Jim. Thank you.
Achieving that as a strength that's different than some other things that other people do.
Great. Jim, I think that's it for the questions. We have 10 minutes to go. You said you wanted time to wrap, so
yeah,
I think we're here.
Yeah, let me do that. So let me recap the 10. So today we talked about mindset shift, letting go of your betterness, and by doing that, if you think about being memorable instead, that's what all these other steps are going to add up to. Being memorable is not about being gimmicky or flashy, doing something that's silly to be remembered. It has to be in the context of what you want them to remember. But if you do all the things that follow, it's going to make you memorable, and that's better than your betterness, which a judge can't judge. So answer these questions. Why now? Answer that in terms of outcomes for the client. What do they really want? Those are the unstated needs that they're not going to come right out and tell you. You've got to uncover them. Why you? Make sure you answer that question as a result, you will, or in order that, or so that. That helps take your strengths and advantages and ties into their benefits. You want to have one main idea, because you'll be lucky if they remember one thing. You know what people tell me when they hear this presentation? I'll say, what's the one thing you remember? They'll say, 7 dwarfs. I'm like, thanks a lot. But it is one of those compelling parts of the presentation that people will always go, oh, you're the Snow White 7 Dwarfs guy. In terms of making it about them and structure, go look at your executive summaries, cover letters, and see what your you to me ratio is. In terms of sequence, don't bury the lead. Put your best argument early. Eliminate clutter. And I call this in my book that I'll talk about in a second, verbal and visual vomit. I call it the vomit twins. And I know some of you are probably eating lunch, and that's why I left it out earlier. Didn't want to spoil your lunch. But that's the clutter that gets in the way of either your written proposal or your presentation. With regard to presentations, 9 and 10 are really, this is a mindset shift. You, not your slides, are the presentation. Slides are just in support of you to communicate an idea that really needs to be brought to life with a visual. But then weed things out when in doubt. It doesn't need to be there. I promise. No one will know whether you had that slide in there or not. It's more important to you than it is to anybody else. So those are your 10 tips. So it was 8 plus 2, the 2 soft ones. Most of these principles are in my book, as Ryan mentioned earlier, published by ACEC. Win More Work, How to Write Winning AC Proposals. It's available on Amazon.com. You can go to my website to get a paperback. ACEC website sells the e-copies. It was originally envisioned as an e-book. It's a 50 or 60-page e-book. The paperback's about 70. The nice thing about paperback, you pull it off the shelf and refer to it real easily when you need it. So it's power-packed. It's a short book, but it is completely power-packed with these ideas. And you don't need a book, but you need tips. You want them to show up right when you need them. Go to 26proposaltips.com. You'll get every other week or so. You're going to get one of those tips land in your inbox, and you're going to go, that was exactly what I needed on this proposal. So what I've done with the book and what I've done with 26 Proposal Tips is I've read all these books on the psychology of decision-making, read books on the psychology of selling, which I think the former is more important than the latter, right? Psychology of decision-making. I've read all the books about proposal writing, so I condensed that down so you don't have to do it. You know, I have 25 years of experience doing this, going back to college and being a competitive public speaker. And drawing from 30 years of experience and condensing it down to 70 pages. And that doesn't give you everything, but you might find a tip or two in that book or even in today's presentation that puts you well ahead of your competitor on your next proposal. And what that'll do is instead of this identical quadruplets problem that many people face today, or triplets or twins, you're going to get it down to be the one that they remember when they are ready to score your proposal or debate it with the other decision makers in the room. If you do those 10 tips, you will have no choice but be memorable and win more work. So I want to thank Client Feedback Tool for sponsoring the program today. Sally Orcutt and Ryan Sadam are fantastic people. I'm glad I met them in Hawaii back in the fall at the ACEC Fall Conference, and I believe that they're absolutely committed to doing great things for their clients. So thank you, Ryan and Sally.
Jim, thank you very much. It looks like most of you stuck around to the very end, so thank you as well for your time and attention. Please know we will be requesting feedback from each one of you about this webinar. We will be sharing that with Jim, and you can expect, since we believe in follow-up, you can expect a response from one of us to any other questions or comments or suggestions that you may have. Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you next month. We have a great webinar coming up. Bob Stocking from Vervago talking about how to ask and answer questions very precisely. He has an incredible process of developing a very clear communication, and those can be extremely helpful tips when trying to discover what's really going on with clients and what their needs actually are when delivering projects. We hope to see you all next month. Thank you very much, and have a great afternoon.